I have seen some strange things on my horror film travels, and I can now say I have seen a half woman, half reptile. Hi guys, so before we get into it, the usual disclaimers. You'll find all my other Hammer reviews in my Hammer playlist, and there will be spoilers today. This is a very old film. It's not, in my opinion, a film that you can really spoil. So this is one of Hammer's one-offs, and it's tempting to think that the one-offs will never be as good somehow as the films that are part of some big long-running series of films like your Draculas, your Frankensteins. But that sort of thinking would be a mistake, because there are a number of hidden gems in the Hammer catalogue which could be classed as one-offs, and this is one of them. This is an excellent film, and I didn't expect that going into it, because I'd looked at some pictures of the reptile on Google and I wasn't that impressed. I thought the creature looked a bit like some random person cosplaying as a lizard man on a Halloween night or something. But if you've not seen this film, fear not, because the reptile is a lot scarier in moving pictures than still ones. The director in this wisely decides not to show too much of the reptile throughout the film, which definitely adds to the atmosphere. This, for me, is one of the scariest monsters in all of Hammer. So the film takes place in a little village called Cragwell Heath in Cornwall. They really did like to set a lot of these films in Cornwall. I guess they like the isolation, the fact that there's not many towns and cities in that neck of the woods. There's lots of moors. Lots of films from this sort of era that take place in Cornwall. It is a big horror spot for those times. So from this same year, Plague of the Zombies also takes place in Cornwall. Not a Hammer film, but The Ghoul with Peter Cushing, also Cornwall. One of the best Hammer films of all, Hound of the Baskervilles, also Cornwall. They're not actually filming in Cornwall. I think this was filmed in Surrey, possibly. I certainly don't think it was Cornwall, but it feels like that kind of area. Not that I've been that often. I've only been once when I was a child. So in this village, the villagers all think that the second coming of the Black Death has arrived, because people have been turning up dead. People have been turning up dead with like black faces and froth around their mouths. For some reason, these villagers are really suspicious of outsiders, but not each other. You'd think if there was a disease in the village, that they would be more suspicious of each other than people just turning up out of the blue who presumably wouldn't yet have the disease. But hey, logic. So our main character in this is a guy called Harry. He's arriving in the village to take over the cottage of his deceased brother, one of the earliest victims of this so-called Black Death. And Harry it is, throughout this movie, who will take on the role of the hero and try to get to the bottom of the mystery. The film is directed by John Gilling. He did 4 Hammer films in total. The other 3 were The Shadow of the Cat, The Mummy's Shroud, and Plague of the Zombies, which I've already mentioned once already. All of those films are really good. Gilling was a safe pair of hands when it came to Hammer. Just to be fair, I will say that those films I've just mentioned, probably none of them are what would be considered some of Hammer's absolute finest, but for me, The Reptile is probably Gilling's best. The cast is filled out with people you've probably heard of and seen in other Hammer films, with the exception of the lead, Ray Garrett, I think his name is. He's really good in this, although this would literally be his only Hammer film. There are quite a lot of Hammer films where you get somebody playing a lead role and that would be their only Hammer film, and this is one of those times. The other principal roles, they were filled by people you're probably more familiar with, people like Jennifer Daniel and Jacqueline Pierce, Noel Willman, all of whom I've seen in other Hammer films. Although the person in this cast who's been in the most Hammer films is actually somebody who only plays a very minor role in this. He plays the vicar. Charles Lloyd Pack is the actor's name, and he has been in 7 Hammer films in total, so he gets the prize for that today. This film is sort of like a greatest hits of all the elements that I like about Hammer films. You've got the isolated village in the middle of nowhere, either in England or in mainland Europe, and there just happens to be a large manor house owned by somebody who is like 50 times richer than the rest of the village combined. And of course, the terror in the movie will emanate from this large manor. It's as if these old films like to say that wealth corrupts, or evil is attracted by wealth. We find out in the first couple of minutes of this that the reptile is based out of the manor house. The only thing we don't discover until late on is how the creature got there in the first place. But when the answer comes, it's very much something we've seen in Hammer films before. You know, this idea of the ignorant Brit or American going abroad, dabbling in things they shouldn't have done, getting involved in religions and cultures that are out of the frame of their understanding, and next thing they bring back a curse or a monster. I think Plague of the Zombies has the exact same setup, and I haven't seen The Mummy's Shroud in a long time, but I can easily picture that probably that film is a case of Brits and Americans going to Egypt or something, messing around on some archaeological dig, and next thing there's a mummy running around. So maybe John Gilling is just a specialist in this type of setup. The violence and the scares and the special effects in this are all excellent. I love the look of the victims as their faces start to go black in this, and you see the white foam around their mouths. That is exactly how I would expect someone to look if they were bitten by a large reptilian creature of some kind. And the reptile is genuinely scary in this. Like I said at the beginning of the review, she has a habit of popping out of alcoves in corridors that you didn't even realise were there. And her MO is to stick her two main teeth into the victim's back. So a lot of the time they don't see her coming. At least with Dracula, you can see him sort of coming at you from the front with his arms outstretched kind of thing. The reptile's not confined to the manor either. She claims victims out on the road, in the fields, possibly inside people's houses. It's no wonder that the villagers are all afraid, or all scared to death because of what's going on. There are so many great details in this film as well, things that didn't have to be there, but they are there because a lot of care and attention went into this film. They really did try and squeeze as much out of the budget as they could. There's a character called Dr. Franklin. He's the owner of the manor. He's the guy who went abroad and got the ball rolling for this whole thing. He wears this green reptilian tie in this, I noticed, which is slightly odd because he hates all things reptilian. He loathes the fact that his daughter has this curse. So I can only imagine that it's his evil manservant who's controlling Dr. Franklin throughout much of this movie, who's forced him to wear this tie just for extra humiliation. It's a small touch, but it gave me a giggle when I noticed it and figured out what the case probably was with that. There's also this prop of like a snake that's upright in the study of the manor, I think, and one of the main characters almost has a heart attack when they bump into this thing. It's kind of like one of those little gimmicky things that you'll buy in a gift shop in Egypt or something, but it's a good little jump scare moment. That there's so many in this movie. There's another one where the manservant character looks into the window of Jennifer Daniels' cottage, and you can just see his face pressed up against the pane with the rain and the wind behind him. It's a lovely little moment. There's also this weird musical instrument that Dr. Franklin and his daughter have got. I can only imagine that he brought this thing back from his travels, because it's not the sort of thing that you would normally spot in a Cornish gift shop. But I've never seen an instrument like this before. It's like a big, long, thick, tubular thing. Dare I say, it's got the same shape as a large snake. And we get to hear the daughter playing this thing in one of the scenes, and it produces some really great music. I enjoyed listening to it. And while this is happening, the daughter is locking eyes with her father, and there's something going on there that you don't fully realise until you watch the film a second time, which I did. I watched this film twice last week because I really enjoyed it. But as a scene with just some really good music in it, it was really, really cool. It sort of reminds me of a scene from Kiss of the Vampire where some of the characters are sort of sat around and one of them's playing on the piano. Coincidentally, the only other film I've seen Jennifer Daniel in, and also Noel Willman. So just for balance, let's quickly go over some negatives. There's not many. So for one thing, a lot of the minor characters don't act very naturally in this film. I'm thinking of one scene in particular. So Harry goes into this pub and immediately all the locals just walk out because they don't want to hang around near a stranger, but there's no way that's happening in real life. I mean, a group of blokes who've paid for a bunch of drinks, just abandoning those drinks and walking off because of one guy coming in, that is never going to happen, like ever, in any era of the world, in any country. So that's bad writing. I think they should have just left those characters in the background whilst Harry got acquainted with Tom, the barman, in the foreground. Also, there are times throughout this movie where certain characters are frustratingly unwilling to divulge what they know about the reptile. There are times I'm just sat there thinking, come on, spit out what you know so Harry can get on with solving this thing. And some of the times this happens, it's characters who are doing it who are otherwise pretty good characters. People like the barman, Tom, I think that's his name. Thoroughly nice guy. I totally understand his motivations in this film, how he desperately wants to protect this planned retirement he's got in this village. I also really like the beggar character. You really feel for this guy. I think his name's Mad Peter, maybe. I'm sure it's Mad something that he's known by among all the local people. But this guy's clearly homeless. He's hardly ever got any food. I can just picture him sleeping in a woodshed somewhere, freezing cold. And because he's in his 60s or something, life's never going to get any better for him. This sort of guy, I mean, the state of his mental health would be pretty low anyway. But then you throw into the mix the fact that he knows this reptile's running around killing people. And I'm not surprised this guy's gone senile. He's going mad. It's a horrible existence that this character has got, and I just really felt for him. The moment where Harry offers him to go back to the cottage for supper, I just thought was a really heartwarming moment. The look on the beggar's face, just absolutely fantastic. So great character. A lot of the principal characters are great as well. I think Harry and Valerie have great chemistry as a couple. They're just a lovely pair, these two. I think Jacqueline Pierce is very well cast as Anna. She's just got the perfect look for that character. I'm not so convinced that the manservant needed to be in this film. I mean, could Franklin have not brought this curse back from his travels without the manservant needing to come along to oversee the process? What is the motivation for this manservant to uproot his life, travel all the way across the world just to ensure that this guy gets his comeuppance? And what's his long-term goal, the manservant? What does he intend to do ultimately, and why is he taking so long about it? It doesn't quite add up to me, though. The fact that the manservant is in the film at least gives us this great fight towards the end down in the caves underneath the manor, which has a great ending, by the way, that fight. One more negative. This is the last one. So the manservant likes to dispose of bodies far away from the manor, presumably so that people don't discover what's really going on. But in this one scene, at least, he dumps a body right in front of all the houses in the village in broad daylight at like 6 o'clock in the morning. It's clearly daybreak. And it's just really strange that you would choose that time of the day and that spot in which to dump the body. I mean, he could easily have been seen. I mean, come on, just dump the body in the woods, man. It's time for my new feature that I'm introducing into my Hammer reviews, and that feature is called Where Would I Have Cast Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing had they been in this movie? Well, I would have put Lee as Dr. Franklin. I think he could have done that part very well. I can just picture Lee being all stiff and uppity in the first half of the movie, telling Harry to keep his neck out, thank you very much, and then gradually softening towards the end, but too late for the character. Cushing could have played this role as well. He basically plays the same part in The Ghoul, kind of. But no, I'm giving that one to Lee. And Cushing, I would give the part of the beggar, a very small role, but I could see Cushing absolutely knocking that part out of the park. I guess if you wanted to give Cushing more screen time, he could play the barman, but nah, I'm sticking with the beggar character for Cushing. Right, I'll quickly show you the version of the film that I've got. Here is my copy of The Reptile on Blu-ray, and what a fantastic transfer this is. It's done by Studio Canal. It's really sharp HD quality, this. There were times when I was looking at the village scenes and you can just see everything in such fine detail. Whatever version of the film you get for this, make sure it's that one. And there are some features as well that come with it. There's a documentary called The Serpent's Tail. This is basically a 20-minute documentary about the making of the film. I watched it and I got a lot out of it. I thought it was pretty cool. There's also this thing called World of Hammer episode Wicked Women. Now, this is narrated by Oliver Reed, of all people, strangely, and it's about some of the nastier female characters from the Hammer world, but it's basically just a clip show. It's showing you like clips from various Hammer films, and Reed says something now and again, but there's not much in the way of analysis. To be honest, I got halfway through this one and then I switched it off. If I want to see the clips from these films, I'll just watch the movies. I don't need to just watch these clips out of context. There's also this thing called restoration comparison, which I guess is comparing this new version of the film with whatever was in existence before. I'm not surprised that they wanted to show off what they did with this film, because the movie looks absolutely terrific, in all honesty. Right, let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this. 1, 2, 3, 4 bloody axes out of 5. I absolutely loved The Reptile. I can see this becoming one of my favourite Hammer films. I really can. So highly recommended this one. So I guess that's it for today. I will be back another time to do another Hammer review. So cheerio, bye-bye for now.